Welcome to the Grow in the Dark podcast, episode 4. I'm Bear Truth, joined by Trevor Person. Many takers suppress givers solely for their own selfish gains, but the world isn't always so black and white, not even for the wealthiest elite. In sharing my ideas on this subject openly, I hope to add nuance to a topic whose complexities are oftentimes overlooked, not to justify the actions of any entities, but rather to understand them more, in hopes of fostering unity. Today's episode of Grow in the Dark is titled Illuminati Good, or How I Learned to Have Nothing and Be Happy. Our first topic, an initiatory experience I call the Wizard of Oz experience, is something I've outlined before in our Super Spectrum review of Wicked for Good and in previous episodes of Grow in the Dark. Its concept is central to the goal of today's message, so I'll restate its main point again now. The Wizard of Oz experience is a hypothetical tool used by the elite to socially engineer the public into mass initiation. This tool works through the elite's manufacturing and bolstering of purposefully flawed public figures throughout history, which are made to participate in similarly contrived events aimed at destroying hero worship and public trust in authority in the hopes that one day every individual may seek to maturely lead themselves as true adults would. This seemingly backwards approach to human evolution may be just that, backwards, but at least a silver lining of increased public resilience may almost always be guaranteed through this system, at least when increased public individuation is not. If the story of the boy who cried wolf isn't as applicable to the Illuminati's philosophy for social engineering as I hope, then maybe the desire of the old German folktales to scare one into doing the right thing is. Either way, let's first discuss the validity of my first theory before moving on to the second, even though my hunch is that both strategies are simultaneously at play on the world stage. Thanks for joining me again, brother. You're the best. You're my co-host. Everyone, please welcome the man, myth, the legend, Trevor Person. What did you think, sir? I know we've talked about this many times before.
Right. No, that's all very true, I think, so far. I think, yeah, um, I'm curious what the second theory is, although like you said, we've probably discussed it, but I'm not, I haven't read what you have here yet, but, yeah, The Wizard of Oz and The Boy Who Cried Wolf and the German folktales.
Yes, that's the second theory, the German folktales. Like I
Right.
said, it probably runs simultaneously.
Yes, that's what I was thinking about, was like, yeah, um, that definitely seems to be the case, that they've got, the way I've always seen it is, I mean, I try to look at things in a lot of different ways, psychological, spiritual, but also I tend to, maybe it's just with what goes on in the mainstream, but I see things politically as well. Like, that's the way I've always seen it. Is this may not be exactly what you're saying, I don't think it is, but it kind of reminds me of the there's the chessboard symbolism, and I've always seen politics like that, that they have two sides that are, the way this relates to that is like two things can be running simultaneously that kind of go together and work for them and sort of the people. either way, like
and the planned aspect, or the strategic aspect, yeah.
And the way I see the political thing is like they have it set up to where there's two teams, but either way, their agenda is pushed forward. Whether the blue people think that they're winning or the red people think they're winning, they kind of set it up to where both, either way, their mission is being accomplished. And this might be a hot take for some people to hear, depending on what color you identify as, but like there is good in both sides that can be fulfilled. I think both sides um, have good hearts that one kind of, I think at its core is like trying to, I mean, this isn't the topic for the day, but it's an example. Like my example, as opposed to the Wizard of Oz, is yeah, just like the one side wants to uphold traditions and another side wants to progress forward, and both of those are things that are necessary, um I think. But that's just an example of running two different sort of playbooks, but really in reality it's pushing forward and keeping people self-accountable, sort of. Not as much with the political stuff, but yeah, that's why I want to
I
hear what
Yeah.
you have to say about your
Yeah.
theory.
Well, yeah, I like what you're saying. I have that, how both sides, well, both sides, yeah, like you were saying, kind of have like a good core and, seem like they're coming from a, good place, but they end up, um, having these, like I said, these built-in flaws, these characters that push these things, things in politics and the world. They have these built-in flaws so that, I think if this isn't a cosmic lesson that we're being taught, to not just trust one side, and to look at the other and see the good in the other and what it has to offer. And then to see that neither side at the end of the day is perfect. And they're just, like the Wizard of Oz, they're always going to be looking out for themselves just as much as, you're going to look out for yourself. So they're going to take themselves, they're going to look out for themselves first. And, when it comes to politics, it's something that's always been easily corrupted power. It seems like the overarching pattern and lesson that we're supposed to learn, like I said, either if it was a contrived effort by any group of people or if it was just, a lesson that humans are being taught by the universe and God, basically, that we can't just keep trusting them. But the Silver Linings Playbook, when you said the playbook, I can't remember, but like Silver Linings Playbook, that movie, I haven't even seen it fully, or at least since I was an adult. I have no idea if it has anything to do with any of this, but like their playbook, the silver lining to it would be that we can become more whole as humans, more individual, right? More individuation means that you separate from your parents, you separate from the authorities in the world, the science, the politics, the society, and you become your own leader, basically. And you learn to think for yourself, and critical thinking and abstract thinking, in schools they're always pushing critical thinking. It's really that's what to me, that's what the lesson of the world stage is too, is critical thinking, being able to think for yourself. Anyways, I'm going to talk about other things, definitely, that you were speaking about as well, but I kind of got thrown off because there were so many things I wanted to say. But the boy who cried wolf analogy is that, we're being taught by these flawed figures that, these people aren't to be trusted, after they lie so much, basically, is what I was trying to say with that. I think you understand that, right? Or I made that clear. Okay, cool. And then of course, going into the second one would be these, in the German folk fairy tales, they would scare children into basically doing what is right. They would say, oh, this character, if they don't eat their vegetables, right? This little boy, if they don't eat their vegetables, they start some fantastic, like, maybe their hair grows so long and their fingernails grow so long that they die or something crazy. But basically, applying that to some of the, not saying that everything is contrived and planned out, but, applying this lesson of trying to teach people to do the right thing to, some of the wrong things that I believe, they kind of leave clues of the top people doing, right? Or it doesn't even have to, come from, the clues that I believe they're leaving out for us to pick out these flawed characters, but, it could just come through, say, the best example would be war. And we're going to have a whole video on war, but say if we see war for ourselves, right? We're going to eventually, hopefully, understand how bad it is and how it's going to, even if we're not hopefully we're worried about, the innocent who die on that side, but what about, the innocent people who die on our side? But I think it works simultaneously with how most wars, at least in America, are justified on basically false flags, or on false flags, literally. And you're usually able to, if you're like a moderate student of history, you can see how that's happened in the past. And then usually while the event's going on, if you're into some, alternative news medias, you can see how that history is being repeated, and that the false flag is, or a new false flag is, the justification for this new war. And, I could see that being a part of the lesson. But this is really, this episode could also be titled Sympathy for the Devil, but, for obvious reasons. But, it's, that's, anyways.
Devil's advocate, per se.
Devil's advocate. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. So now going on to another thing, right? Like when you're saying the agendas get completed either way, to me, I believe that there are two ways that this sustainability agenda gets served. And no matter what side you are on, you're serving it. If you're, extremely, at least, deep into the politics, and you're, really following what it's telling you to do. So the case would be, say you're big blue guy, right? You're believing in the whole climate change, everything. And you, not saying that that's completely wrong. I'm more believe in pollution and reducing our, own footprint. But
Mm-hmm.
say you believe in everything, you're scared that the world's going to melt, blah, blah, blah. All the ice, the sea levels are going to rise, right? All the extreme, extra stuff, that really paints a dark picture of our future. Maybe you see that as a Democrat and you get the idea, okay, I'm going to do better, for the country in the future. So you become, your footprint is, less impactful. Your carbon footprint is less impactful. These small little things, like, you know, driving an electric car, even though we know, or we don't know, even though I've heard, that could be just as bad, if not worse. But maybe hopefully you even become vegan, which I would say is, and I think it's been proven, that's the number one thing you can do to help stop climate or help help the world become sustainable, right? Or maybe you don't have children because you're scared, the world's going to end. You don't want to bring your children to that. Okay, so that's going to obviously reduce, the amount of exertion on the environment's resources. Okay, now say you're red Republican, all right. Well, maybe you have a bunch of kids because you're like, these are my soldiers, right? But where are you going to have them? Hopefully you have them off grid in some super sustainable, less, you know, environmentally impacting, uh, whatever bunker or whatever the hell it is. But you see, like,
Mm-hmm.
they're scared of maybe the apocalypse and the war, right? That the Republicans are always fear mongering, right? And so they're now gonna become more sustainable through that. And so we're being scared on both sides to be better people almost, which, I think there's probably a better way of going about it, right? But I'm just saying what I think, or what I see, what I think I see. Okay. And now, speaking on, and I'm glad I saw this, but recently on Instagram I saw a video where this man is speaking to two bowls of rice, right? Inanimate objects, you would think, right? And they're both closed in a little jam jar, mason jar. And it's that snowflake thing, the Japanese experiment where they talk to a snowflake, and the snowflake, crystallizes in a really bad way if you talk poorly to the thing, right? And the snowflake, crystallizes perfectly, or the plant grows perfectly, and the plant grows bad if you're speaking to it negatively. And I feel like this is something that, should be applied to people, you know, if because I feel like there's some validity to that experiment, right? The rice was beginning to be moldy when you're calling it all these insults and saying these bad things to it, almost like we're being, you know, um, led down a dark path with all these wars that we're being fooled into, right? And I know it's not perfectly, um, perfectly translatable, because, the materialist world will tell you you're the best thing in the world, right? And then get you to be more into it, right? So that's almost like them telling, talking good to the plant and growing it worse. But, they're doing that in that way. They're going about it in a very backwards way, right? Where, like I said before, maybe they're trying to make bad things happen so we learn from them, right? We see that those aren't, we try all the bad possibilities, and then we come back home and say, you know what, we shouldn't do those things anymore, right? Maybe it's teaching kids to be, or letting 4-year-olds say they're transgender or whatever the heck it is, and then they end up getting a life altering surgery that they're dealing with for the rest of their life, or obviously like war, joining at 18, allowing that, whatever, or fostering the division that leads to that, right? So I felt if we were a lot more open, we wouldn't have these uh, hard lessons learned, or we wouldn't have these hardships, and maybe not the hard lessons learned, but maybe we could, like I said, learn them in another way. I feel like with a wiser, less judgmental public at large, we could all come together somehow. And that's what I hope to do with our podcast, Trevor.
Yes, I think we are. And I, or at least we're laying a good foundation and we have a good start to doing that. But that I had a crazy realization from what you just said. Like, one, it came from what you said. I was thinking about something I've always thought, but then I thought about it in a different way I never have, which is like, what I've always thought is that I I don't know, I guess this probably comes from being Christian or into Christianity. I look at it kind of like a father. I don't look at the Illuminati like my father, but I think I've said to you, like, I look at it like not my father, but if it was a father, like in a um analogy way. I don't know what the word for that would be, but in an
An
analog
analogous.
analogous. That's what I
Oh,
was.
sorry.
No, you're good. I was trying to think of that, but I wouldn't have. I was gonna say analogical, which is not that.
Okay.
So yeah, an analogous way. If the Illuminati was a father, um, I've always thought it's kind of a shitty father. It's not a terrible father. It's a harsh father, and the same thing could be said for the Christian God. But I
Might
think
be
that
allegoric. I don't know.
right. I think they're both
Maybe both are words. I don't know.
they both definitely are words. I think analogous is the word I was looking for though. Um
I'm sorry.
no,
But
you're good, you're good.
you can.
The I think the Christian father, my actual father, I would say, is harsh but loving, genuinely loving. The Illuminati father, I don't see the love as much. I do think that there is love there though. It's like a much harsher father, like a brutal father. Like the dad that has 10 kids and he knows one or two of them is like destined for greatness and he's really brutal on all of them, really harsh on all of them. Um and maybe there's a few that he knows are idiots and he doesn't even think about them or he like allows them to he keeps them safe. So he is loving in a way. He keeps the ones he thinks are idiots. He keeps them safe and kind of sheltered, which is loving in a way. Um, but with he's basically hard, like brutal on all of them, hoping that that one will be his successor. That's how I see the Illuminati. It's like you could uplift all 10 of those kids. You could uplift the entire humanity with the power that they have, which I've also always felt that they also have less power than not you or I, but then people give them credit for. I think that's why they have to use these backwards tactics or seemingly backwards tactics is although they have probably more power than any human on earth other than in my opinion Jesus, but Jesus is technically not he's not living on earth now, but they they have more power on earth right now than any other entity, like human made entity, and but that isn't to say that they have all the power. That's why they use these tactics, because a smart, loving father would do what you're saying is like they would simultaneously push the ones that need to be pushed, and arguably all of them need to be pushed, but they would also um the Illuminati is like manipulative. They're not uplifting. They're trying to, so then that's pretty much that. But what I just thought of is I think there's also this like motherly aspect that both aspects of the Illuminati, both the feminine and the masculine, in my opinion, at the moment at least, because in the past I would have kind of I would have disagreed with you a lot more in that I didn't think that they were doing any good or even thought they were doing good. I thought that they knew they were doing bad and that they were just doing this for self-fulfilling reasons until I looked at the lockdowns in a different way that like yeah, they probably could literally like force like really force everyone to get not even what they did. Like they could force everyone to get like bio trackers and like um they could have really really locked it all down like for good, like permanently, I mean, and they didn't, but they did do the stuff that they did, which I think showed me that okay, they do have like they allowed me and you and I to make our own choices, which does show that there is some sort of goodness there and free will. Um, but the motherly aspect, I also see, so both the masculine and the feminine, like I was saying, I kind of see them as a toxic version of. Like the motherly aspect of them is it's not really because I see this in our culture. If you were to go back in our parents' culture and their parents' culture, and then especially the generations before that, like every generation up until ours, was like the brutal father for sure. Like, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, go to war, um, you know, get money.
That's funny.
But
I see what you're saying.
now it's not the overly bearing mother. I think there's an element of that, but it's kind of like do whatever makes you happy. I love you no matter what. You are perfect the way you are, which there is something to be said for you're perfect the way you are, but I don't think that's a good perfect the way you are is a crazy thing to say. Like you're beautiful the way you are. That's a better way. That's a positive way of putting it. But anyway, in our culture, modern postmodern culture is like it's very like a mom who um but that's what that was my new
I get
thought
what
is
you
that the last
Yeah,
thing I'll say about that is that I think that's what we need is like a balance of both. Like every child needs a strong, stern but loving father, and mother everyone needs a mother who is supportive and loving and uplifting. I don't think in the past the Illuminati has been those, but I can see those elements in there. I don't know
yeah.
if that got too sidetracked, but
No, no, yeah, it brings up a lot of good points for me. I know. So yeah, one thing I want to say is that along with humans evolving, they're also evolving, right? So they're getting more, they're becoming better people. Um, Hopefully more compassion. I think, like Trevor's saying, they are. Uh, Funny thing, Ariana Grande said right before the 2020 whole fiasco, she said, uh, God is about to prove that she's a woman on Twitter, and to me,
That's
I
hilarious for some reason.
sorry.
That's hilarious to me for some
Yeah.
reason.
Well, I think, she might have had some sort of, insight to what was going to happen. And I can't even remember how, I related that to it back in the day when I saw it. I think I was like, when I eventually, saw what happened in 2020, I think she said it like in 2020, blank's gonna happen. And, God's going to prove she's a woman. I think it was, what I was thinking of is like, she's doing it in this, or they're doing it in this more, less. Yeah, it was basically, instead of World War III, we're getting like a war on the mind, the psyop of what happened that year. And yeah, like Trevor's saying, there were ways out of it, basically. It wasn't mandated completely. And I think I agree with Trevor. It was like a more free way of them trying to control us. Of course, I believe that they could have totally just kept that going forever. And like going with the clue thing, I think that, or the Wizard of Oz thing, is like they fumble everything that they do so that we're able to pick up on it, right? And they wouldn't stop it if we weren't, or if they weren't allowing it to stop, right? And they fumbled all of that and made it look so, for a person with common sense, they made it so clear, right? Like pushing out these experimental drugs. Of course, anyone with a little bit of reasoning, is going to be like, hey, maybe I should slow it down, and then you find some other thing about Fauci where he's corrupt and blah blah blah, and then bam, you're on the right path. But now going back, I wanted to say this earlier, I forgot, but just a more recent version of this flawed character building that they do is the CIA just recently, or whoever, the Department of Justice, gave the files for and I want to hear Trevor's opinion, because I know he follows some of the news just like myself, and more of the stuff that he and I find interesting, which this would be it. But want to know if you've heard about this, Trevor. But anyways, the CIA, or the Department of Justice, released CIA files on Jeffrey Epstein, or whatever it was, their files on Jeffrey Epstein, and they redacted a lot, which wasn't, of course we've heard, what they redacted was not actually preventing or wasn't protecting anyone who was a victim, which is what the law is. So that's the first clue to the corruption. But when they dropped the files, what they redacted could actually be unredacted by putting it in a Word file and then unhighlighting the blackened classified text with the highlighter function. So you literally just copy and paste their file, or their words, into a Word file, right? Their files from the Epstein files into a Word file, and then you highlight it, like the highlighting function in Word, and then you turn off that highlighter, right? Or you so it literally. So what I'm saying is, no real Department of Justice is going to be that dumb. They did that so that we would get the idea that they're dumb, right? Or for some of us, finally, hopefully, get the idea that they're trying to help us in a way, right? I kind of jumbled the wording on all of that, but hopefully it makes sense. Did it make sense, Trevor?
Yeah, no, I had no idea about that, and that is insane. But like, totally what you're saying. Like, um, I think there is an aspect of that is a power move on
Really
both
quick,
sides.
check it out. There's a video, Penguin or whatever his name, Moist Critical. He made a video, and that's how
Mm-hmm.
I saw how easy it is to unhighlight it. just want to, so that people can find this and see exactly what I'm talking about. That was how I learned about this. And yeah, come on, guys. Most critical, though, of course, probably another controlled opposition, or at least he's, I guess, quote unquote, smart enough to know not what to say and know what to say because he knows how to play the game. But he goes, oh, they're so dumb. They're so dumb. But come on, guys. No one's that dumb. No one.
Right.
Thank you, Trevor.
I mean, people are that dumb. Like, part of me does, I don't.
The Department of Justice of America isn't that dumb. Let's just say that.
No, they're not. They're not.
Or everyone. There would be some. It would cross someone's desk to be like, "Hey, let's check this." But
Right.
like I guess maybe the part of what the riddle is like this inept Trump government of the FBI under Kash Patel, blah blah blah, a bunch of pedo blah blah blahs. They don't know how, I mean, but whatever. Like I said, I think it's deeper than that. But
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's like multi-layered, and that's I have always seen it in a very layered way. That's why I said that earlier. I don't know if I've said this on the podcast a million times, but I probably said this to you a million times that, like, yes, I naturally, maybe it's natural, maybe it's I've just over time curated my thoughts like this. But I've always seen everything in a layered way that um all things are true, because, like, a psychologist will say it's all psychological, and a a priest will say, oh, it's all spiritual, etc., etc. And I think they're all right. Like, they're not necessarily all right about their take on it, but I don't think that it just has to be psychological or spiritual. And with this, yes, like, war and war on the minds and whatnot is it's a layered strategy, and something like that shows how layered it is. That on one hand, it is a huge power move to, I don't know what this is called, but I know there's, like, concepts like this in strategies of war, like the art of war or whatever. And I know there's, like, never outshine the master, which I think is like a micro version of this, where, like, it's kind of like the opposite of this. They want you to perceive them as the master, but then they're also showing you, like, or at least they want you to think, like, see, we're idiots too, or, like, we're people too, we make mistakes, just like something that we have been hiding from you for decades, and now we're accidentally showing you. um and then there's the aspect of, yes, they're doing something so dumb that they would never do, to show people, there's some foolery afoot. It's like
to show people there's some what?
foolery afoot.
Okay, right.
It's like, yeah, like clues, like you said. I can't think of anything else. I was gonna say breadcrumbs, but, like, breadcrumbs is like,
Breadcrumbs is perfect.
yeah. But it's more than that. It's like an Easter egg. It's like, yeah, it's like an Easter egg. They're, like, showing you something that, for the people that are not paying attention, it's it works. And then for the people who are paying attention, it works even better. Um, in this case of Jeffrey Epstein, I don't fully understand what the goal is there, but I always have an open mind, and usually it all hindsight is 2020 or whatever.
Well, I think a lot of the Jeffrey Epstein stuff is true, and how they get people on the world stage to do what they want them to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they know power, sex, and hunger are the three desires everyone has in common. So, they can, get that carrot in front of a person, and one of those carrots in front of a person, and make them do whatever they want. And anyways, I think that's like a soft disclosure thing they're doing right now, um, along with what I was saying before. But the another thing, going back to the German folk fairy tale analogy, um, just like how I was saying how they're scaring the Democrats into being sustainable through climate change and all that, and then they're scaring the Republicans into being minimalist farmers off grid by being or by pushing a lot of war, or scaring them with war and apocalypse. And then it's both serve the agenda of sustainability, but there is also a similar idea that kind of fits with everything we're talking about right now, especially the leaking of the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And I heard this idea spoken about at the very end of a Higher Side Chats interview with Professor Jiang, and the show host of the Higher Side Chats. He always does like a little debriefing at the end where he just talks to his audience, and he said that there's an idea that claims the elite welcome allegations of things like adrenochrome and whatever, because even though these things aren't true, it makes them seem as a more formidable opponent in the eye of the public, and it scares the public. So I think all these things can be true, and they're all, working at the same time.
That is crazy because, yeah, again, I would have disagreed with that a few years ago. Um, One, I do think that there is not necessarily adrenochrome. I do think that's, um, what do they call it? One of those things where like they throw in some truth and some fabrication to like muddy the waters. Like they definitely do some weird stuff with babies and whatnot and blood. But that's a topic for another day. Um, I'm more so interested in, yeah, like now I would agree with that in that if that is what they're doing, at least that did work on me because I had a path of um that used to be my driving motivator in life was like to
Save the babies.
save the babies. Which is
Hey,
like
we've all been there. I mean,
we've all
that's
been
kind
there,
of what
and
we're doing right now.
yeah, and
We're
it
doing it
did
for the innocent who aren't able to understand these things or don't get the opportunity to learn them, like we did.
right. But it did evolve naturally, and there is this arc that I think all um whatever you want to call it, truth seekers sounds kind of um dramatic or whatever, but like people I would call spiritual people, even if they're not spiritual, like even if they don't identify as spiritual, people who are on a similar path, there's always this arc of like um whatever it is for them that helps them realize like, oh my gosh, the Illuminati is real, and then they're like, the Illuminati is bad, and then they're like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, the Illuminati's doing this, I have to stop them. And then there's this like, then you kind of go through a nihilistic phase where you're like, oh, there's nothing I can do about this, it's too big, it's too powerful. And then you get to a point where you like reach the bottom and you're like, well, I guess all I can do is fix myself. And then once you start helping, once you start uplifting yourself, then you become stronger, you become better, and you then realize it's like full circle. You're like, okay, now I actually can and am doing something about this. Maybe they're not scaring little infants and sucking their blood, which is debatable, but um I can be there for the people in my life that do have babies, or if I happen to have my own baby, whether on accident or by choice, I can make sure that that baby is someone who will, one, realize in how beautiful this life is and make the best of it, of their life.
I think this is what I'm saying. Is
Mm-hmm.
this is. Can I mute you for a sec, Bo? Because I know I'm going. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
want to cut you
I
off.
just muted it too.
All right. This is the goal, which sounds paradoxical. What Trevor just said, right? Not to not to just try to, because everyone figures out at some point, oh, I can't just make a militia and blow up the government, right? I gotta, you know, basically just try to separate myself from them and be better on my own. And like I said, it sounds paradoxical for that being their plan. Like that's what they want you to do. But and I understand why, obviously, because they're literally seeming like they're trying to do the opposite, which that's the thing. They are whole in everything they do. Like they are trying to do that. But I'm just imagining that there is a portion of them, it, if not if this isn't just being preached outright in the Mason lodges, like this is why we're doing it, but like I feel like there's a portion of them who think what they're doing and are hoping what they're doing is going to lead us to the better world, right? But where everyone is like Trevor said, doing those things and taking care of their families. So, and I'm glad you brought that up, Trevor, because I really wanted to say that. But I forgot, and I had already scrolled past these notes. But it's also like if it weren't for 2020, I probably would never have questioned the government, and then maybe I would have never questioned science and become spiritual and have all of the peace in being spiritual provides me with, right? So I really think I'm thankful for the situation I'm in, and partially it's because of that. But of course we could argue if there was an easier way or a better way, and a way for everyone to get to that without there being all of the obviously casualties of war, side effects of the blah blah blah, and everything else that comes from the division, but maybe there really is some order out of chaos. But yeah, I know we're gonna wrap up here soon. Is there anything you want to say really quick on that, Trevor?
No, I mean, you covered, there was one thing I was going to say, but you kind of addressed it, just that the casualties of war, um, yeah, a loving father would not, yes, he shows that one kid of the 10 that he loves, he shows them the truth and builds them up, but the other ones, like I was saying with the ark, I forgot that, with the ark, that's if you're lucky, you go through that arc. Some people aren't so lucky, and they once they hit that nihilistic bottom, they go do something like Columbine or whatnot. And yes, there's obviously fake and psyop and MK Ultra and all that too, but some people do just crash out, and they're not as lucky to make it through to the other side of the arc. And a loving father a truly loving father wouldn't allow that. So not to but yeah, I think if you've got some more to say, I would I'm happy to hear that, and I would say that's a good we can get to the final chapter here.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. And I want to thank you for having the courage to be here with me and having the love in your heart that helped me come to my conclusion that I wanted to be more open with my approach to helping humanity. So yeah, I just really appreciate you, brother. And I just want to say that now in case I forgot at the end, you know.
Yeah, no problem. And same here, kind of in the opposite way that I now see the goodness in more things, including even the Illuminati.
You're welcome, brother. Of course. So now a couple things. We're gonna get through them because I think we've done really well today and kind of covered a lot of the things. So I won't be just reading off things like I sometimes do, but real quick, things I've thought of, you know. Let's just start here. Planet, right? They're planning the whole planet. Evil, evolve, right? Just little schizo ideas, or like yeah, noticing whatever things I notice. But now keep going. So surveillance state, you know, there could be some safe things. Obviously, it's a slippery slope. You look at, you know, China and you know, the facial ID, you know, the facial recognition and the credit scores, and you know, there are a lot of bad things, you know, and but if you're worried that, you know, you're gonna have a meat you know, maximum amount of meat that you can buy a day, I just want to say fuck you. Sorry. I don't I'm on their side with that one. So anyways, yeah, I just saw I know that came off as like super mean and whatever, but that's how I feel. And that's you know, I was watching like a Max Egan video, and he just kept harping on, like, you know, scaring people with that, like and there was great points other than that. You know, he's talking about how, you know, they could just basically stop your bank account in a second or whatever, you know, whatever they want to do, they could do it, you know, once it's digital. But, and I understand that fear. But yeah, there's good things that could come of it, you know, and yeah, but before I like kind of thought of all the nuance and like the negatives that, you know, could come of it, I wrote down here, oh my goodness, digital ID. Oh no, whatever will I do? My ID is digital. So is my money. I don't know. Maybe I should stop doing drugs or other crimes too. Um, Thought you would think that's funny, Trevor.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it is. That made me think of, it's so funny. This is just like the I think they do this too. I see this a lot lately on the right. I've always seen this on the left, but lately it's been showing its head on the right too, which is like um I'll just give an example of the left real quick that like I've always thought it's funny they are um that at least for a while there, and a lot of them still are very anti men or anti patriarch, which you could make an argument for that, but then they're also pro Islam, and that's contradictory. Um, it's like a very obvious contradiction. And then on the right, you made me think of, I see a lot of those. I won't get into them right now, but there's been a lot of those lately. Like one real quick that's super funny to me is like the looks maxing is becoming popular on the right, and like that's just like very feminine to me. Um, I have nothing
Agreed.
against it, but like it's funny that they call everything gay and they're so worried about gay people.
Or sorry, not because I love feminine, right? But
Right.
I'm just saying, like, yeah, that's like a imbalanced feminine.
Yeah. And I have
Oh,
nothing
that's what you were saying.
against. Yes. He looks making optimizing your looks is one thing. There, I have nothing against that. But then like I've literally there's obviously the guy Clavicle who's going viral, like who um who would be seen as like a right wing. He like says the N word, so like he would be accepted on the right and the left would not accept him. He says, you know, looks is the most important thing as a man. And I'm like, that's like the most feminine thing I've ever heard.
That's
Um,
funny.
but
Contradictory.
yes, but then the one you made me think of finally is it's funny that yeah, and you opened my eyes to this a long time ago that a surveillance state wouldn't be so. I would not want to live in one. We arguably are in one already, to be fair, but like um a true one like in the movies, like it wouldn't be that bad unless you are a criminal. There is the idea of thought policing that's can be bad, but depending on what thoughts they're policing.
Well,
But
once it gets bio surveillance, then it's going to
right,
be like that, right?
right, like and some people would also argue, I wouldn't doubt that they can already somehow
Read your mind
access
for
your
sure.
thoughts.
I agree.
But the point is, I'm getting at
Or
is that
I'm open minded.
right, um, conservatives on one hand are so worried about, you know, black crime, like racist conservatives will say that or whatever you want to call them, um, you know, black crime or whatever, they'll talk about that a lot, and they'll say that like a certain group of people more are committing all the crimes or whatever, whoever it may be at the time. And then but then they're so against the surveillance state, and it's like, well, if you believe that, you know, those people that you're not are committing all the crimes, why are you worried about a state where, you know, people will be there's the idea of pre-crime, like
Yeah.
um predicting people who will be criminals and locking them up before or whatever. I'm not too sure what that would look like, but it's funny to
Minority
me.
Report shows, but
Yeah, they they're so against crime, then they're freaking out about like ideally their perfect state. Like
right. Well, yeah. The that goes that goes with just unmute yourself whenever you want to talk, Trevor. That goes with kind of what I was going to say. I want to apologize for saying the F you, but really it's coming from the bottom of my heart. Like, I feel like that's just very selfish if that's what you're worried about the most, or like that's even a worry in your eyes. You know, like I understand, you know, you want your freedom, but to me, that's just super gross to even do. But anyways, and that's the thing. That's one of the things I hate is how they bully, or how Clavicular is a bully and an insulting person. I think you know, that's like the opposite of what Trevor and I are trying to do. So I want to, like I said, apologize, and I don't want to alienate anyone and make them feel like they're you know, an evil person. You know, I think it's a bad choice to, you know, be non-vegan. You know, but anyways, that's all I want to say there. I'm gonna keep moving if that's okay though, Trevor, and you could but is that good?
yeah, yeah. I think you're fine. It was kind of funny, but also yeah, it was from the bottom of your heart, and yeah, it's I think more nuanced. It's a nuanced conversation that could be had, but it's not really the topic of conversation. And I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, we're gonna have a conversation, or we're gonna have a big episode with Christspiracy on that. But what I would have said is F you, but I love you. You know, I love you, but F you, man. You know, like, come on.
Right.
It's really what you're thinking. Anyways, let's keep going. So, oh, and then another thing, like, you know, I've said on other episodes, you know, I'm not planning on having children, and even said I'm antinatalist. Obviously, I want bodily autonomy. I don't want people to, I don't want to force people to not have kids. I would never do that. But I don't want to treat the children who are born as massive, a big fortune. This is the greatest thing that could. I mean, once you're alive, it's the greatest thing in my eyes. To stay alive. You're a person you're a piece of God that can talk. You can teach so much to us. So anyways, love it. But anyways, the depopulation agenda, blah, 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 like for me personally, right? If I were to somehow become infertile, right? No kids sounds like a better life for me. Just saying. No, but that's just obviously my opinion, and that's what makes me happy. Anyways, it was a joke I wrote down, so I'm reading it. And then going into kind of what Trevor was saying, like, don't join them, but make your own cult, culture, community, social, society instead, right? Instead of either joining them or imploding, like Trevor was talking about. And then, this is another joke. Perseverance increased by their BS resistance plus 33. Thought that would make you laugh, Trevor.
Yeah.
Okay. And then talked about that. Yeah, we're going to get into the war episode, but, basically, I think that test is still going to be offered to us until we stop signing up for it, and that, lesson is going to keep being, either the universe or them are going to keep trying to teach it to us that we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't join the war because it's just terrible, obviously. But, and, something I'll throw out there again, throwing it out. Their idea of what's for the greater good is at the end of the day only an idea. They can't predict the future. That's my belief. I don't believe that even if they had some sort of contact with an entity that's showing them the future somehow, or whatever it is, I don't believe that there's any way of proving that that's true, right? Because that those things could be fooling them somehow. Those things could be fooling themselves somehow. And I feel like the only way we're ever going to really know what this thing is all about is when we pass away, which is going to be interesting. I believe we'll have an episode on my idea of heaven and then Trevor's idea of heaven. That'll be really interesting. I thought about that like a week ago. We should do that. Sounds good, right, Trevor?
Oh yeah.
Heck yeah, Bubba. All right. And then, so more nuance, maybe predictive programming as desensitization and normalization. Is that what it is? Or are they clues left for us to have the Wizard of Oz experience and or for their own karmic retribution? Of course, they also believe in thinning the herd, so that gets served through their thing. But, do they do these things, right? The predictive or do they do all these things and then have predictive programming, like I said, to desensitize you and normalize you? Yes, that would make sense in the way that, conditioning you to see pandemics on the screen and then you in movies, and then you say, oh, that could happen in real life when it's happening, right? And you go along with it, right? Or but it doesn't really work, and it's probably more, in my opinion, I think it's more obvious that it's the wizard, or it leans towards the evidence of it being a Wizard of Oz experience that they're trying to give us when it comes to the 9/11 predictive programming in cartoons, but especially in Back to the Future, where it really just lays it out. Check out that YouTube video, guys. 9/11, or Back to the Future predicts 9/11. But yeah, those things seem like more purposeful clues for a truth seeker to later on confirm, that they've been planning this the whole time, right? And yeah, that comes to the question, are they really only just trying to control us? Or could they also be trying to leave us a path forward too? And are they purely evil, or is there a method to their madness, right? Is there can there be order out of their chaos? And right, talked about, is it really always them, right? No, of course it's not always just them planning it, right? And I think they're copying how this thing we're in, life, God, the universe, is actually artistic and leaves symbolic, connections between people's birthdays and people's, all these clues, and just like, they do that, and, maybe it's just, maybe they never do. Maybe they're always super selfish and they're never trying to help us. But I think there is some sort of any like attempt for them to help us in their own twisted way, if you'd like to call it that. But and that is what it is, but and then, as they say, God is a comedian, right? So these riddles mirror that. I've heard a lot of truth seekers calling it mockery, what they do. I see it more as like a riddles that they try to leave for us to solve. But and now, lastly, this is going to be a clunker, but we're at the home stretch. This is my last note, Trevor. Thank you for being here. It's been awesome. But last thing, my greatest inspiration is Andreas Exertus. I think he is another, equal to Trevor, reason why I'm here. If I wouldn't have seen what Exertus, how open and how easily understandable he could be to his audience with, the amazing and beautiful, complex ideas he brings up, I probably wouldn't have ever tried it myself. But he made a video recently on Think Tank, one of his podcasts, called Decentralized Collusion. And I felt like it was the perfect way of summing up how I see this thing, right? Like, I feel like a lot of the actors that they, like I said, either tell them what they do in their contract, or, bolster up through, their agents, and, maybe give them some editorial advice, or however you'd like to put it. I feel like a lot of them, or maybe they have or maybe some of those agents have no contact, like I said, and they're just controlled opposition through self-censorship and deceit, or they lie on, or they do what they're doing, just because, like I said, they know how to play the game. Anyways, all of those people, right? It's like a decentralized collusion, and that kind of goes into, something I saw recently, although while I was writing it, I was like, this is pretty weak, but I wrote the whole thing and I'm going to share it anyways. And if you're skipping to the end of the video and this is all you hear, then sorry, you should have watched the whole video. But anyways, here you go. So let me get to where I was. So this idea of working within their system, right? Like I was just saying, how people will kind of either copy what they're doing, or play the game, have their own Easter eggs, like Trevor said, and make their own flaws in their own character, right? Or flaws in their own argument, or leave little rabbit holes for people to find. I kind of had that idea that some person was doing that in the past. His name's Irving Finkel. He's a honestly, like, everything I've seen from him, he seems, I haven't seen much, but he was just recently on the Lex Friedman podcast, and he's telling all about Noah's Ark, and he's providing, like, how he's saying how that and this guy worked at the British Museum. He's like an archaeologist or something, and reads the cuneiform Babylonian language or whatever, Mesopotamian, whatever the language called. And he's on the Lex Friedman podcast recently. His name's Irving Finkel, like I said. He was saying that and it's a beautiful idea, and I really agree with him. He was saying that Noah's Ark, that idea probably, which is, he brings up how it was in the Babylonian story of the flood in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it's even identical down to the main character in both stories, one being Gilgamesh and then the other being Noah. But they release birds, 3 birds after the flood, or after the rain or whatever. And what they're doing is releasing the 3 birds. They release the birds to see if there's trees yet, if trees are growing yet, and if there's trees yet, then there's ground they can stand on. So they release the birds, to see if there are trees, right? If the bird comes back, then that means there's nowhere for the bird to stay, and so we shouldn't try to go out yet into the world. And so, but the 3rd one ends up being never coming back. So they say, oh, he's okay, it's safe to go out now, there's land. Anyways, I thought that's beautiful, because I like when people put together that there were, to me, that's initiatory, showing how the religions are copying each other. And he was saying that, specifically, he was saying that this idea of the flood had to have come somewhere other than Israel, because Israel doesn't flood, but in Babylon it did flood, and they're very scared of it. And that's why the flood myth would have been probably something they really experienced. Obviously the whole world didn't flood, but their area did, and that's why it scared them so much. And they created that story from it. And anyways, I watched that, and that's not when I got the idea that he was kind of being playing the game, as I've said. I won't explain what I mean again. Rewind if you don't understand. But when I did think that he was doing that, was a video or a documentary I saw on PBS a while ago, something about the alphabet. So you could look up, I think it's called like A to Z Sumerian alphabet, something like that. It's a documentary on PBS. You could look in the Pure Pill Instagram highlights, one of the old ones. I put the title of it there. It's a series on PBS, and he was in it. And he's showing this tablet of it's called, I wrote it down here, the Tablet of Shamash. And it's wild. It looks like, or I mean, what's going on in the picture is like this massive giant, who of course is probably just, to me, significant, or like a smart person, right? They would draw the bigger man as smart. I don't think he was literally a giant. Anyways, there's a giant who is the king, and then there's 2 people coming to visit him, but there's also this god with multiple arms at the top of the tablet, and he's making like a projection, and it looks like he's making the whole thing go on. And then there's like this big, super crazy, like star thing in the center of all of them. And then Irvin Finkel just says, oh, this is a tablet, because he could read the caption, or at least, and who would be able to validate him is what I'm saying. He goes, This is just a tablet of the king receiving offerings from people, and he doesn't go into any of the stuff. And maybe the caption didn't either, right? Maybe he's. This is why I'm saying it's probably not the best example, but the best example is what I said earlier about Penguin and Moist Critical, him just going along with the obvious lesson or narrative from that. But anyways, Irving Finkel is not, it seems like he's either he doesn't know how to read the caption, or the caption isn't saying it, and so he's not trying to hide anything. But it seems like he's trying to hide something, but he's hiding it so obviously that it makes him look like, or it makes people want to, or it should make a inquisitive person want to challenge him, which is basically what the whole point of this all is. So yeah. Oh, and another kind of person like that, it kind of bleeds in, but could all even be tied to like the Zacharias Hitchens owns translations of Sumerian, which have been frowned upon by academia. But once again, who's really to say who, if anyone at all, is telling the truth, right? So what I mean there is, right, like if Irving Finkel's BSing us, maybe Zacharias Hitchens isn't. I tend to think that Zacharias Hitchens is pretty obvious controlled opposition, but anyways, don't want to
Who's he
discredit
again?
Irving Finkel. I love him so much. He's awesome. But anyways,
Who is Zacharias Sitchins again? That name used to be like super in my mind, but like it's been a while. I don't remember. I know he's.
he's the Anunnaki guy.
Mm,
Yeah, you remember Anunnaki?
yes, I'm familiar with that, but I feel like that's not what I know him from.
He wrote these books that translated the tablets or the cuneiform, saying that there's planet Nibiru and.
Right.
All right, that's all I have, Trevor. We good?
Yes, I'd say so. Were you saying that the three birds was the Epic of Gilgamesh?
Yeah, that's literally in there, that story, man. It's, and the flood and everything, and it might not have been Gilgamesh who's the hero that he does that, but one of the heroes, one of the main characters, lets out the three birds just like Noah did, and
Right.
it seems pretty
I think
obvious that they're sharing.
yeah. Um. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it's not surprising. Yeah. But yeah.
All right. Well, if that's all, then I appreciate you and I love you, brother. And thank you all for listening to us. We're going to put this out as soon as possible. We're shooting it on January 1st, 2026. We'll put it out that day. Trevor's going to work on the thumbnail with me, and then the thumbnail will be edited as well. So you're looking at a picture, by the way, you're looking at a picture of the Georgia Guidestones. And that was, I believe, the hole you could look through to see like some sort of celestial alignment. I just thought it was beautiful.
Yes.
Which is kind of fitting. There's a lot of art to what they do. So, or a lot of beauty. So we'll leave it there, and hope everyone has an amazing 2026. Hope we don't go to war. And I hope you guys can give us a like and a subscribe and a comment maybe, and do whatever you feel is right. But we work really hard, and we want to share this with everyone. So thank you guys for watching, and thank you guys for everything. All right. Happy New Year, everyone. Love you, brother. Have a good night, guys.
Peace out.
Peace, bub.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.